Latency while recording bass. I hate this. Today's topic, latency. How many times have you tried to record your bass and it sounds really good in your headphones and to the beat evenly? You know, you're a good bass player and then you're trying to plug it to the rhythm and that sounds great in your headphones. But when you play it back, there's some kind of offset delay between the beat and your bass recording. That's called latency. And that can happen for multiple reasons. And today we're going to get that sorted. I'm going to go through all of the reasons and all the tweaks which you can make in your Ableton to make that sound nice and to the beat. Hi, welcome to my channel. This channel is all for beginner musicians and music players and bass players and guitar players and keyboard players. Anyway, whoever is making music and trying to make that music sound great, that's the channel for you. So without further ado, first tip starts even before touching your guitar and before touching Ableton or your computer. So forget about 10 feet cables. Forget about 3 feet cables. Get cable as short as possible. Thanks to that, your signal will go really fast because it has really small distance to travel. Just kidding, don't take that for serious. The first real tip is you need to have a USB interface or any audio interface because built-in computer sound cards are really slow. You need a designated audio interface in order to create without latency. I'm using Focusrite Solo, which is absolutely enough for recording one instrument at a time. Okay, so let's plug in our bass to our interface. Okay, of course we want to first set up a gain. So what do? We press the instrument button because we are working with an instrument. If we're trying to set up our interface, it is important that we will adjust the gain knob accordingly to what we're going to play. So if we're going to do loads of slapping, we just need to get that gain a little bit lower. If we're going to do like loads of rather mellow sounds and like slower bass recording, we can have that gain a little bit higher. So we are sure that our interface will pick up all the signal that we need. Of course, we're looking for the green. If you go too hot, it's gonna blink orange or red, like so. We don't want that. That's fine, although a bit too hot. Let's go down a little bit. The left ring, as you see, is from my microphone, and the right ring is from my bass guitar. It only blinks orange when I play really hard, so that's absolutely fine. Okay, and the second important tip is where we really want to start in our Ableton, just to make sure everything is correct. We want to set up our audio interface. So we're going to go to Live Preferences. I believe in Windows it's in Edit Preferences. Then we want to go to the Audio tab and see what we have here. So the audio input device will have to be Scarlett Solo USB. In my case, in your case, it can be any other USB interface, but make sure that's the one you're using. And audio output device too, we want to have the same choice here. What next is important? Sample rate. So the sample rate, usually you want to keep between 44,100 or 48,000. For like a better audio recording, you can stick to 48. Obviously, you can go higher if your CPU allows for that. Also, if you really need to, in most cases, 48,000 is absolutely enough. And then the biggest, most important thing is that latency section here. So we want to look into that in a little bit more detail. So the most important thing you can change, and that's basically the only thing you need to change, is the amount of samples. For example, I will be using 128 samples, which in most cases will be absolutely fine and absolutely enough. You might want to go lower, which means if you choose less samples, the latency will be smaller and we have the input and output latency displayed just here. If we go the other way, 512 samples, the latency is bigger. Like here, it will be quite difficult to play and keep up with beat with 46 milliseconds. But it has a drawback because if you go too low, it will make our CPU work way harder. So you just need to adjust that to one thing, as short as possible, and second, Make sure it does not use 100% of your CPU power and is not going to create any glitches. You can then try with the test tone, and if it will glitch, it will probably mean that you've set too small amount of samples. So let's go back to 128. Next thing. In order to record, we need to set up our audio track. So first, insert audio track. And the input will be number 2 in my case, because if we see that green bar means the microphone is recording. But we have number 2 here, and we can press the monitor in just to see if our bass guitar is audible. And it is audible. Okay, so everything works very fine. If there's any latency, you'll probably hear it at this stage when you try to pluck your string and hear the sound going through your interface. It will be delayed in your headphones if there is any latency. What can also cause some latency? It could be the monitoring. So for example, here I have the monitoring in so I can hear the bass while I'm playing it straight away, and my arm doesn't need to be tracked like you see here. For example, if we set to auto, you will only hear your bass when your track is armed for recording. But that will create a little latency. So when we're trying to record, we can try to switch that off. We will not hear our bass through our headphones, but that is a proven way to diminish some latency. I've changed my sample so I can show you that latency. So I've changed the buffer size to 2048 samples, and now I can hear pretty bad latency. Let's look at that. Okay, that's pretty bad. So let's try to record to the beat with that latency. Let's see what's going to happen. Which is so bad I can't even record to that. But let's see how does that waveform look. So as you see, probably, yeah, most of the beats are actually missed, and that's quite a lot of latency here. Some of them surprisingly are okay, but probably my brain compensated for the latency. But then I tried to record to the beat and most of them are not really. It's really even hard to record that. So one of the tricks that will quite significantly sort out the latency is to turn off the monitoring. If we switch off the monitoring, it will somehow have no latency at all. So we will not be able to hear our guitar and effects, but we will be able to record without latency, which is the whole point. Of course, we can press the direct monitoring on our interface. That will give us some feedback to our headphones. But even without that, we can take one ear off our headphones and listen to the bass while we play. Okay, let's try to record to the beat once again with the monitoring off. Suddenly, no latency. That works most of the time. So we see we've recorded that sound without latency. Now we can play it back with the effects and it's gonna play. And we hear that most of the plugs are actually to the rhythm. So that sorts the latency problem even with the very long buffer sample. So your CPU will not suffer and the recording will go really smooth to the beat. Also can happen that some of the effects that you apply to your track will slow you down. Performance impact, which is now off. But when we turn it on, the performance impact will show a little bar of our CPU usage. So we see my CPU usage is around 8, 9 to 11%. And that track is actually causing that. This one has no CPU usage at all. So the more intense effects, and you will see more of the CPU usage. And turn it to auto. And then let's try to add some CPU intensive effects. Put shimmer, let's put convolution reverb pro, or like 2 of those. That will be very unpleasant to hear. Oh, actually that's quite interesting. But then we see our impact goes really high. That can cause also some latency. So if we want to record without latency, what else we can do? We have our track set with all the effects. We don't want to mess up anything. We just want to leave it as it is. Okay, we can create a new audio track and arm our bass guitar here as well. Switch the monitoring off. Switch here to monitoring off as well. Arm the other track and record on the plain track. That should get rid of the latency, even with our high CPU usage. Let's try. We hear some effects because we had this play button here. If we switch it off, let's see how it does only track 3 sounds. Yeah, that would work without any latency whatsoever. If you record it on a separate track and it sounds nice, you can just move it here and use it on the track with the effects. There's no latency. Magic. Okay, now I've recorded some sound. It's not really even. Let's hear it back. Okay, so now what if we want to make that sound better? Because I missed some of the notes, I didn't play perfectly to the beat. The Ableton has a really cool thing, which we can warp the sound and make it to the beat, even if it's not. So what we want to change first with the bass guitar, we can change that to either tones or complex. Complex will be the best. Of course, it will be quite CPU intensive, but let's leave it like that. And if we see some of the beats that are not aligned to the grid, we can align them manually. Just double click. And we have the orange marker, which you can move there and back, and it's going to stretch the whole thing. But be careful, we will probably want to set up a marker at the end so it doesn't move beyond that point. And then whatever beat we're going to see, if it's misaligned, like let's say this one here, we want to lock the one that is aligned and then move this transient. You can see even tiny markers here. You can move the transient to the beat. Okay, without moving the other one. Let's go further. Okay, we can move this one tiny bit. What else here? This is nice. This one's not really. We can move that. Let's try to move that a little bit like that. Perfect. This one too. Yeah, let's hear it back. Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, so warping, that would be just a final tool that you can adjust your playing if you missed some notes and you didn't play exactly perfect. That's very easy and very quick. Summarizing everything, the buffer size is the most important. Just try to keep it as low as possible. 128 would be best in the most cases. If your CPU is not working fast enough and it's going to glitch your sound, just don't worry, go to the higher amount of samples and just turn off the monitoring. That will sort the thing once and for all. You will record with the beat. Then the second thing, try to turn off all the effects if they're slowing down your computer. We can also set up another audio track, record on the second audio track, and then just move the sample and move the recording to the other track with all your effects in. And there you go. That's it. After that, you can just warp quickly. Just the transients, just the beat, just to make it nice, aligned to the grid. As we can see, we even have grid. So there we go, just a couple simple steps that will sort your latency once and for all and make your recording nice and painless. If you liked the video, please subscribe. Also, check the links in the description down below for the gear I use and I would 100% recommend. I will be creating a course on how to set up a bass guitar sound in Ableton using stock plugins, even for Ableton intro version. So with the very few effects, I will show you how to create your own preset or your own effect track just to make your bass sound awesome. So stay tuned, follow for more, and see you guys in the next video. Cheers! First tip to make your latency quicker to smaller. First tip to make your latency shorter